A Jedi Master walked away from everything the Order stood for and sparked a war that would last 1,000 years. His name was Phannius, but the galaxy would come to know him as Darth Ruusan. Around 2000 BBY, Phannius was an Umbaran Jedi Master who got fed up with how the Jedi did things. He looked at their teachings about serving others and protecting the weak and decided it was all wrong. Phannius believed in something he called malevolent solipsism, which sounds fancy, but really just means he thought only the strongest people deserved to have power. In his mind, his will alone should control the Force. So Phannius left. But he didn't just walk away quietly. He declared himself Darth Ruusan and set out to tear down everything the Jedi had built. Ruusan was persuasive. 50 Jedi followed him out the door, turning their backs on the Order to join his cause. That defection triggered what historians call the Fourth Great Schism, a massive split in Jedi history. But Ruusan didn't stop with those 50 former Jedi. He traveled across the galaxy finding scattered Sith cults that had survived in hiding and brought them all under his command. With this growing army, Darth Ruusan declared a new Sith empire. He launched attacks on the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order, starting what would become known as the New Sith Wars. The year was 2000, before Battle of Yavin, and nobody realized they were watching the beginning of a millennium of horror. For a while, Ruusan looked unstoppable. His forces struck at Republic worlds with organized fury. The Sith finally had a leader who could unite them and a clear enemy to fight. Systems fell under Sith control as Ruusan's empire expanded through the Outer Rim. But Darth Ruusan had a fatal flaw. He was completely full of himself. The same philosophy that drove Ruusan to reject the Jedi made him impossible to work with. He treated his followers like servants who existed only to carry out his personal whims. Every decision had to flow through him. Every strategy had to match his vision. If someone questioned him or suggested a better approach, Ruusan would punish them for daring to speak up. His ruthless leadership style wore on the Sith under his command. They signed up to conquer the galaxy, not to bow and scrape before a tyrant who cared more about his own glory than their shared victory. The Sith who followed Ruusan started to realize he saw them as tools, not allies. Then Ruusan suffered a military defeat. The exact details of the battle are lost to history, but we know his forces took a beating from Republic defenders. For a leader who preached that only the strong deserved power, losing a fight was a bad look. His own Sith decided he wasn't strong enough anymore. The assassination happened just a few years into the war. Ruusan's disciples turned on him and struck him down. They took out their Dark Lord and ended his reign before it really got started. The man who started a galactic war fell at the hands of the very people he claimed to lead. You'd think that would be the end of it. Remove the leader, end the war. But the new Sith Wars didn't stop with Darth Ruusan's death. Ruusan had lit a fire that wouldn't go out. He proved that Jedi could be turned. He showed that scattered Sith groups could work together. He demonstrated that the Republic and Jedi Order were vulnerable to attack. Every Sith warlord who came after him learned from his example. The problem was, they also learned from his mistakes. They saw what happened when one person tried to control everything. They watched how ego and arrogance got Ruusan ended. So instead of rallying behind a single new Dark Lord, the Sith movement shattered into dozens of competing factions. Warlords carved out their own territories across the Outer Rim. Each one claimed to be the true heir to the Sith legacy. Each one fought the Republic when convenient and fought other Sith when necessary. the galaxy descended into chaos with no clear battle lines and no end in sight. Darth Ruusan's legacy was a millennium of darkness and betrayal among the Sith. His disciples spent the next 1,000 years battling each other as often as they battled Jedi. The fourth great schism he triggered became the longest, most tragic conflict the galaxy had ever seen. The Jedi Order and Galactic Republic, comfortable after centuries without a major Sith threat, suddenly found themselves fighting for survival, and all because one Jedi Master decided his way was the only way. The Sith movement exploded into chaos after Darth Ruusan fell. Instead of one empire under one leader, dozens of warlords grabbed whatever power they could and started carving up the galaxy for themselves. Picture the Outer Rim turned into a war zone with no clear sides. Every ambitious Sith Lord claimed a few star systems and declared themselves the rightful heir to the Sith legacy. Some were former Jedi who followed Ruusan into darkness. Others came from those ancient Sith cults Ruusan had unified. All of them wanted the same thing: more territory, more power, more control. These warlords fought each other as much as they fought the Republic. A Sith Lord would spend months planning an assault on a Jedi outpost, then get stabbed in the back by a rival who wanted his planets. Alliances formed and dissolved within weeks. Betrayal was the standard operating procedure. For people living in the Outer Rim, life became a nightmare. You might wake up under the rule of one Sith despot, go to sleep under another, and find out the next morning that a third warlord had taken over while you slept. Each one demanded tribute and loyalty. Each one punished anyone who seemed too friendly with the previous ruler. Entire sectors fell into this pattern of constant warfare. Frontier worlds got raided over and over as warlords tested each other's defenses or just took what they needed. Trade routes became dangerous. Colonies got abandoned. The chaos spread like a disease. The Galactic Republic had no idea what hit them. For centuries, the Republic had enjoyed relative peace. Sure, there were always pirates and smugglers to deal with, but nothing major. The Sith were supposed to be gone, ancient history, a problem solved by heroes from a different age. The Jedi Order had gotten comfortable. The Republic military had downsized. Then suddenly, the Sith came roaring back in the form of dozens of war bands, all attacking at once from different directions. The Republic scrambled to respond. Fleets got redirected to plug holes in the defenses. Jedi Knights who spent years studying philosophy found themselves leading troops into battle. Nobody was ready for a war on this scale, and it showed. The Sith moved fast. They knew exactly which worlds to hit first, because many of them were former Jedi who understood how the Republic thought. They seized traditional Sith strongholds like Yavin 4 and Zeost, places steeped in dark side energy that gave them extra power. They even managed to infiltrate Republic defenses through sabotage, planting agents who fed information back to the warlords. Republic forces won some battles and lost others, but the overall trend was grim. The Sith kept gaining ground. Every victory cost resources the Republic could barely spare. Every defeat meant more worlds falling under Sith control. The war spread like wildfire. Battles erupted on countless planets across the outer and mid-rim. The Republic's resources got stretched thinner and thinner. Their resolve started to crack under the weight of endless conflict with no end in sight. Then things got worse. Around 200 years into the war, the Jedi made a terrible mistake that would haunt them for generations. Sith-backed Ubi's forces got their hands on ancient superweapons, chemical weapons from some long-forgotten conflict. These weapons were powerful enough to wipe out entire populations. The Jedi decided they had to act. They couldn't let the Sith use those weapons. So they launched a strike on the planet Uba 4, where the weapons were stored. The mission was supposed to be simple. Get in, destroy the cache, get out. No lives in danger, problem solved. But something went wrong during the destruction sequence. The Jedi managed to blow up the chemical weapons, but the explosion released a toxic agent into the atmosphere. The poison spread across Uba 4 faster than anyone could stop it. The Ubi species, the very people the Jedi were trying to protect, got caught in the cloud. Thousands perished. Some estimates say the toxic agent wiped out most of the Ubi's population. The Republic tried to spin it as an accident, collateral damage in a necessary operation. But the damage was done. Alien populations across the galaxy looked at what happened and saw the Jedi Order as destroyers. Accusations flew. Some called it xenocide. The Republic's reputation among non-human species took a massive hit. For the Jedi, the incident at Uba 4 represented everything wrong with the war. They were supposed to be guardians of peace and justice. Instead, they found themselves making impossible choices that led to disasters. The line between defender and aggressor started to blur. The early decades of the new Sith Wars were defined by this kind of confusion and horror. The Jedi Order got forced into more aggressive tactics. They led armies, ordered strikes, made decisions that peacekeepers should never have to make. Every choice came with a cost, and the costs kept adding up. Meanwhile, the Sith Warlords kept fighting each other and the Republic with equal enthusiasm. The chaos showed no signs of stopping. The galaxy settled into a new normal where war was constant. Trust was rare, and hope felt like a luxury nobody could afford. 250 years into the war, something emerged from the chaos that terrified even other Sith. They called him the Dark Underlord, and nobody knew if he was alive or dead or something in between. The stories about the Dark Underlord were wild. Some said he was a dark side spirit that got summoned from chaos itself and somehow took physical form. Others whispered he was the ghost of an ancient dark Jedi named Zendor, come back to finish what he started thousands of years ago. Nobody could agree on where he came from or what he really was. What everyone did agree on was this: the Dark Underlord was absolutely terrifying. He showed up at a time when the Sith were still fractured into competing warlords and cults. But the Underlord had something the others lacked. He could actually get Sith to work together. One by one, different Sith groups bent the knee and joined his banner. He crowned himself Dark Lord of the Sith, and suddenly the scattered war bands had real coordination for the first time since Darth Ruusan. The Dark Underlord built his power base on Malrev 4, a planet soaked in dark side energy. The place was a natural nexus of evil, the kind of world where the Force itself felt twisted and wrong, perfect for what he had in mind. There, he established an alliance he called the Black Knights. These weren't your typical Sith rabble. The Black Knights were organized, disciplined, and loyal to the Underlord in ways that Sith rarely managed. He turned them into a proper army instead of just another gang of Darksiders fighting over scraps. From Malrev 4, the Black Knights launched attacks across the Outer Rim. They targeted space stations along the Zona-Mickey hyperspace route, hitting trade hubs and supply depots. The attacks were vicious. The Black Knights didn't just conquer territory, they terrorized it. Reports from survivors described scenes so awful that Republic officials tried to keep them classified to avoid panic. The Dark Underlord himself led from the front. He wasn't the type to sit in a throne room giving orders while others did the fighting. He was out there on the battlefield, right in the thick of it. People who saw him fight said he moved like death itself. The Underlord wielded 2 Sith swords at once, spinning and striking with this cold, mechanical precision. No emotion, no hesitation, no mercy, just pure, destructive force. Jedi who dueled him didn't last long. He cut through them like they were nothing. What made him so scary wasn't just his skill, it was how empty he seemed. Most Sith fought with passion, with anger, with something driving them. The Dark Underlord felt like a void, an absence where a person should be. He embodied everything wrong with the dark side, all its worst qualities wrapped up in one walking nightmare. For years, the Underlord and his Black Knights were unstoppable. The Republic kept throwing forces at them and kept losing. The Jedi Council debated strategies while the death toll climbed. Something had to change. That's when Jedi Master Murtagh stepped up. Murtagh was a seasoned warrior who'd seen plenty of combat during the war. He looked at the Dark Underlord problem and realized conventional tactics wouldn't work. You couldn't just march an army at Malrev 4 and hope for the best. The Black Knights were too strong, too well defended. He needed a different approach. So Murtagh came up with a risky plan. He secretly hired Mandalorian mercenaries and told them to stage a full assault on the Sith stronghold. Not a real attempt to take the fortress, just enough of a threat to draw out the defenders. The bait worked perfectly. When the Mandalorians attacked, the Black Knights rode out to meet them in force. The Dark Underlord himself joined the battle, eager to crush these new opponents. Everyone's attention focused on the main fight. That's when Murtagh made his move. While the Black Knights were busy with the Mandalorians, he slipped through their lines and infiltrated the stronghold. He found the Dark Underlord engaged in the battle and challenged him directly. The duel that followed was fierce. 2 masters of combat, one serving the light and one serving the dark, trading blows on the surface of Malrev 4. Lightsaber against Sith swords, the Force itself bending around their clash. In the end, Murtagh won. He struck down the Dark Underlord and ended the reign of terror that had gripped the Outer Rim for years. But victory came with a terrible cost. Something happened to Murtagh when he defeated the Underlord. Maybe it was the dark side energy saturating Malrev 4. Maybe it was the act of taking such a powerful Darksider's life. Whatever the reason, Murtagh fell to the dark side himself in the aftermath of the battle. The Jedi Master who went to Malrev 4 to save the galaxy came back changed. The darkness that lived in the Underlord found a new home in Murtagh. He'd won the fight, but lost himself in the process. The death of the Dark Underlord was still a major victory for the Republic. The Black Knights scattered without their leader. The coordinated Sith threat he represented fell apart. For a while, things got a little easier. But the war didn't end. Sith uprisings kept happening across the galaxy. The Black Knights eventually reformed under new leaders in later years, and Murtagh's fall served as a grim reminder that fighting monsters could turn you into one. The Dark Underlord's legacy was the centuries of fighting still to come. He proved that even when the Jedi won, they lost something in the process. That's what this war did to people. It took heroes and broke them over and over again. 500 years into the war, the Republic finally started winning. It had taken half a millennium of getting beaten down, but they were done playing defense. For centuries, the Republic's strategy had been simple. Hold the core worlds, try not to lose too much ground, hope the Sith eventually destroy themselves. It wasn't working. The Sith kept coming, and the Republic kept shrinking. Something had to change. So the Republic decided to build an actual military force that could fight back. Shipyards like Quat Drive yards went into overdrive. Factories that had been producing civilian transports switched to building warships. The Republic poured resources into creating a massive fleet, bigger than anything they'd fielded in living memory. This wasn't a defense force anymore. This was an invasion fleet. The counteroffensive started with careful planning. Republic strategists identified key Sith-held systems and mapped out a campaign to retake them. The Jedi Council coordinated with military commanders, combining Force abilities with conventional tactics. For the first time in ages, the Republic went on the attack with real organization behind it. The results were incredible. Republic forces won a major battle at Gap 9, pushing back Sith warlords who'd controlled that sector for decades. Then they won at Corfelian, then at King's Galquek. Each victory opened up more territory and forced the Sith onto their back foot. These weren't small skirmishes. These were full-scale battles involving thousands of ships and hundreds of Jedi. The Republic proved they could take ground and hold it. After 5 centuries of bad news, people across the galaxy finally had something to celebrate. The Sith advance into the expansion region ground to a halt. Warlords who'd been expanding their territories year after year suddenly found themselves retreating. Some lost everything they'd spent decades building. The momentum had shifted. Morale in the Republic skyrocketed. Recruitment numbers went up. Systems that had been considering surrender to local Sith lords suddenly had hope again. The Jedi Order's reputation, battered by incidents like Uber 4, got a boost from all these victories. Maybe the Republic could actually win this thing. But here's what's interesting about those victories. They weren't won by politicians or diplomats. They were won by Jedi who'd stopped being peacekeepers and become full-time warriors. The Jedi Order had changed completely over those 500 years of war. Masters who should have been teaching younglings about the Force were instead teaching them how to lead troops into battle. Jedi Knights spent more time planning military campaigns than mediating disputes. The whole Order had militarized. By this point, Jedi weren't just leading armies, they were running the government. Around a century before these victories, the last non-Jedi Supreme Chancellor had stepped down. After that, only Jedi held the highest office in the Republic. They made the laws, controlled the military, and shaped policy. Think about what that means. The Jedi were supposed to serve the Republic, not rule it. But necessity had pushed them into positions of power. Someone had to make decisions during the war, and the Jedi were the only ones with the authority and respect to do it effectively. These Jedi Lords, as they came to be called, transformed themselves into warrior generals and battle commanders. They studied military history. They developed new tactics. They made the hard choices that came with command. Victory became more important than meditation. Winning battles took priority over Jedi ideals like compassion and patience. The traditional Jedi way of doing things got put on hold. There'd be time for peace and reflection after the Sith were defeated. Until then, the Order needed warriors more than philosophers. And those warriors delivered results. The Jedi-led counteroffensive showed the entire galaxy that the Sith could be beaten. Warlords who seemed invincible got pushed back to their strongholds. Territory that had been under Sith control for generations got liberated. For the first time in centuries, the Republic was growing instead of shrinking. People dared to hope that maybe the worst was over. Maybe the tide had finally turned for good. Maybe their children would grow up in a galaxy at peace. That hope lasted about 30 years. The problem was that the Republic's victories hadn't actually destroyed the Sith. They'd just forced them to retreat and regroup. Warlords who lost battles didn't give up. They fell back to their core territories, licked their wounds, and started planning their revenge. Some sectors did experience a brief lull in fighting. The constant raids and battles stopped as exhausted Sith forces pulled back to defend what they still held. War-weary populations got a chance to rebuild. For a little while, life almost felt normal again. But the Sith momentum was only stalled, not stopped. The Warlords were still out there, still plotting, still hungry for conquest. They watched the Republic celebrate its victories and waited for the right moment to strike back. That moment would come sooner than anyone expected. The Republic's resurgence had bought some breathing room and restored hope. But it also made the Sith angrier and more desperate. The tenuous gains would soon be tested in ways nobody saw coming. The war was about to get much, much worse. Those celebrations in the core worlds would turn to ashes. The hope that sparked during those victories would be snuffed out by one of the most devastating defeats in galactic history. The Republic thought they were winning. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Everything the Republic had built over 30 years collapsed in a single day. The Battle of Mizra changed everything. A coalition of Sith warlords had been watching the Republic's victories with growing alarm. These weren't the scattered, disorganized raiders of earlier years. They'd learned from their defeats and decided to work together for once. When they struck at the planet Mizra, they hit with everything they had. The Republic never saw it coming. Their forces were spread out across newly liberated territories, trying to hold ground they'd just taken. The main field army was positioned at Mizra, confident in their strength after so many recent wins. That confidence turned out to be a fatal mistake. The Sith attacked with overwhelming force. Multiple warlords combined their fleets and armies into one massive assault. They'd coordinated the strike in secret, moving their forces into position while Republic intelligence somehow missed all the warning signs. When the battle began, Republic commanders realized too late just how badly outnumbered they were. What followed was a nightmare. The Sith tore through Republic lines like they were made of paper. Ships exploded in orbit while ground forces got overrun on the surface. Jedi Knights who'd won countless battles found themselves surrounded and cut off from support. The Republic army that had seemed invincible just months before was getting destroyed. The numbers tell the story. Over 500,000 Republic soldiers fell at Mizra. 500,000 lives snuffed out in one confrontation. The casualties among Jedi were even more shocking. Hundreds of Jedi Knights either fell in combat or fell to the dark side during the chaos of the battle. That second part deserves attention. Entire Jedi battalions defected to the Sith in the middle of the fight. The stress and horror of watching their armies get slaughtered broke something in these Jedi. Some gave in to rage and started using dark side powers to survive. Others made the calculated choice to switch sides rather than perish. Either way, the Jedi Order lost hundreds of knights in a single day. The name Mizra became a curse word across the Republic. It represented total military catastrophe, the worst defeat in living memory. A poet named Felu later wrote epic poems about the battle, trying to make sense of the carnage through verse. Those poems are still read today as a reminder of just how bad things got. News of the defeat sent shockwaves through the Galactic Senate. 30 years of victories wiped out overnight. The Republic's best field army destroyed. Hundreds of Jedi dead or turned to darkness. People couldn't believe it. How could things fall apart so quickly after they'd been going so well? The Senate chambers erupted into chaos. Senators who'd supported the war effort now demanded answers. Others called for immediate peace negotiations with the Sith. Some wanted to know why their intelligence services had failed so completely. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. Confidence in Jedi leadership evaporated. For decades, Jedi had run the government and commanded the military. The Republic had trusted them to deliver victory. Mizra proved that trust might have been misplaced. Accusations flew back and forth. Politicians who'd stayed quiet during the winning streak suddenly had a lot to say about Jedi incompetence. The political fallout was immediate and brutal. Supreme chancellors resigned or got forced out as the Senate tried to restore confidence. Each new chancellor promised to fix the mistakes of their predecessor. None of them could stop the spiral. Worse than the political chaos was what happened across the galaxy. Republic worlds that had felt safe under Jedi protection suddenly felt vulnerable. If the Sith could crush the main Republic army that easily, what chance did individual planets have? Many systems made the pragmatic choice to surrender to local Sith warlords before the fighting reached them. Better to bend the knee now than get destroyed later. The Republic's territory began shrinking again. All those gains from the Resurgence got reversed as worlds either fell to Sith attacks or simply gave up. The momentum had shifted back to the dark side. Into this power vacuum stepped new warlords eager to claim their piece of the collapsing Republic. One of the worst was a Zelosian named Darth Riven. He'd taken his name from corrupted records of the ancient Sith Lord Darth Revan, which tells you something about his ambitions. Riven seized control of the planet Almas in the Kularin system. The world had a natural connection to the Force, making it perfect for his plans. He built a fortress there and started conducting experiments that would have made other Sith uncomfortable. Darth Riven's big project was creating something he called Sith Battle Lords. These were warriors bound together through Force magic, compelled to obey commands without question. Riven thought he'd solved the eternal Sith problem of infighting and betrayal. If he could create troops that literally couldn't disobey, he'd have an army that would never turn on him. The experiments were as cruel as they were ambitious. Riven tested his techniques on prisoners and volunteers alike, binding their wills to his through dark side rituals. Those who survived the process became his battle lords, elite enforcers with no choice but to serve. Riven's rise exemplified the post-Mizra period. The Republic was too weak to stop new warlords from carving out territories. The Jedi were too demoralized and scattered to mount effective resistance. Across the galaxy, Sith leaders sensed opportunity and pounced. The Jedi would eventually fight back. Riven's fortress on Almas wouldn't stand forever. But in the years immediately after Mizra, the Sith were clearly winning. The Republic's brief moment of hope had been crushed. replaced by despair and the growing certainty that maybe the Sith couldn't be beaten after all. The war was about to get darker still. The Republic started falling apart, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a building slowly crumbling from the inside out. After Mizra, the war dragged on for centuries. The fighting never stopped, but something worse happened. The Republic itself began to decay. The economy that had funded fleets and armies for generations started to fail. Mines across the Outer Rim ran dry. Mega corporations that employed millions of workers collapsed under the weight of endless war. Unemployment spread like wildfire. People who had jobs suddenly found themselves with nothing. The galactic infrastructure that held civilization together broke down. The HoloNet communications network, the invisible web that connected every star system, collapsed. Planets that had been in constant contact for thousands of years suddenly couldn't reach each other anymore. Systems became isolated. News stopped traveling. Entire sectors lost touch with the wider galaxy. Republic borders shrank for the first time in millennia. World after world either fell to Sith attacks or just got abandoned when the Republic could no longer defend them. The map kept getting smaller. Every year, the Republic controlled less territory than the year before. Where Republic law disappeared, crime and anarchy filled the void. Outer Rim worlds that used to have Republic peacekeepers now had nothing. Pirates raided shipping lanes without fear. Warlords who weren't even connected to the Sith carved out their own little kingdoms. Order broke down completely in some regions. Then a plague hit. The Kandorian plague swept through Republic space at the despise of massive numbers of people. On some worlds, 2 out of every 3 people perished. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Quarantines failed. The disease just kept spreading while the Republic was too busy fighting the Sith to mount an effective response. By 1400 years before the Battle of Yavin, things had gotten so bad that the last non-Jedi Supreme Chancellor stepped down. From that point forward, only Jedi held the highest office in the Republic. They were the only ones people still trusted, the only institution that hadn't completely fallen apart. Jedi Lords ran the government, commanded the military, and tried desperately to hold civilization together. But even the Jedi couldn't stop what was happening to Darth Revan on Almas. He'd been building his power there for decades, turning the planet into his personal fortress. Revan had big plans. He terraformed Almas to suit his needs, changing the very nature of the world. He even bred a new species of grass called Kaluthan that altered the atmosphere to make it breathable for him. The fortress he built became a dark side stronghold, soaked in evil energy from his experiments. Those experiments were the worst part. Revan kept working on his Sith battle lords, refining the Force magic that bound warriors to his will. He delved deeper into Sith sorcery, uncovering techniques that most Dark Lords wouldn't touch. The fortress on Almas became a laboratory for the darkest aspects of the Force. For years, Revan operated freely. The Republic was too weak to challenge him. Other Sith warlords left him alone because he stayed in his sector and didn't threaten their territories. Almas became this isolated pocket of darkness that everyone knew about, but nobody did anything about. That changed around 1250 years before Yavin. The Jedi finally decided they'd had enough. They couldn't let Revan continue his experiments unchecked. A force of Jedi Knights gathered and launched an assault on Almas, determined to end his reign. The Battle of Almas was brutal. Jedi forces stormed the fortress while Riven's battle lords defended it. Lightsabers clashed with Sith blades. Force lightning crackled through the halls. The fighting raged through the stronghold as the Jedi pushed deeper inside. The Jedi won. They destroyed large sections of the fortress and drove Riven out. He barely escaped with his life, fleeing into the unknown regions of space. According to some reports, his own apprentice betrayed him during the retreat, which was very typical for the Sith. What the Jedi didn't know was that Riven survived through Sith sorcery. He'd discovered a dark staff artifact that let him fling himself forward in time. Centuries later, he'd show up on Ruusan during the final battle of the war. But for now, his threat was ended. The fortress fell silent. The experiments stopped. It counted as a win. The fall of Darth Riven should have been a turning point. Instead, it was just a brief moment of light in an increasingly dark galaxy. The Sith weren't done. Not even close. A Sith sorceress named Belia Darzu declared herself Dark Lord and started what became known as the Sictus Wars. This happened between 1250 and 1230 years before Yavin. Darzu brought something new and terrible to the conflict. She created techno-beasts. These weren't droids or ordinary soldiers. They were living beings transformed through Sith alchemy into horrific techno-organic monsters. Imagine a person fused with machinery through dark side magic, their flesh merged with metal, their will completely overridden by Sith control. That was a techno-beast. Darzu operated from the ancient world of Tython, one of the most force-sensitive planets in the galaxy. From there, she unleashed waves of techno-beasts against the Jedi and anyone else who opposed her. She conquered the entire Tapani sector, a significant chunk of space, using her nightmarish army. The Jedi struggled against these things. How do you fight an enemy that's part machine, part corrupted life form, all controlled by dark side sorcery? Traditional tactics didn't work well. Techno-beasts could take damage that would end a normal soldier and keep fighting. They followed orders with absolute precision. They were weapons in a way that even the most fanatical troops couldn't match. Belia Darzu looked unstoppable. Her techno-beasts kept winning battles. Her territory kept expanding. The Jedi couldn't figure out how to stop her effectively. It seemed like she might become the dominant Sith warlord of the era. Then she got poisoned. Not by the Jedi, but by other Sith. The Macrosa Order was a group of secret assassins allied with the Sith in the Tapani region. They'd operated there for generations, working in the shadows. When Darzu started conquering their territory and threatening their influence, they decided she had to go. Around 1230 years before Yavin, Macrosa assassins got close enough to Darzu to poison her. The Dark Lady was ended at the motive of her supposed allies. The Sictus Wars ended not because the Jedi won, but because the Sith couldn't stop betraying each other. The techno-beasts fell apart without Darzu to control them. Her empire collapsed. The Tapani sector fell back into the chaos of competing warlords. Nothing really changed except which Sith were in charge. That's what made the new Sith Wars so exhausting. Individual Dark Lords got defeated, but the war itself never ended. Cut off one head and 3 more grew back. Depose one warlord and 5 more fought over the territory. The conflict just kept going, generation after generation. By 1200 years before Yavin, the war had raged for 8 full centuries. Nobody alive remembered peace. The oldest person in the galaxy had been born during wartime. lived their entire life during wartime, and would fall during wartime. War was the normal state of existence. Entire generations had never seen what the Republic was supposed to be. They knew it as this struggling government barely holding on to the core worlds. They'd never experienced the prosperity and stability that used to define galactic civilization. For them, Sith warlords controlling huge portions of space was just how things were. The Republic still existed, technically. It still controlled important worlds like Coruscant, but it was a shadow of what it used to be. Where it once spanned the entire galaxy, it now clung to a shrinking core of loyal systems. Where it once represented hope and justice, it now represented survival. Technology stagnated. In some regions, it actually regressed. Knowledge got lost as libraries burned and scholars passed away. The great innovations that had defined previous eras stopped happening. People were too busy fighting to invent new things or preserve old wisdom. Infrastructure lay in ruins across vast stretches of the galaxy. Hyperspace routes that used to be safe became dangerous. Space stations got abandoned. Entire colonies disappeared. The physical signs of galactic civilization crumbled away, replaced by military installations and fortifications. The Sith controlled massive territories. Individual warlords like Revan and Darzu got defeated, but dozens more held power across the outer and mid-rim. Some had carved out mini-empires that lasted for generations. Others rose and fell within years. But collectively, the Sith presence never diminished. This was civilizational decline on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Not a sudden collapse, but a slow grinding down of everything that made civilization work. Trade, communication, law, order, progress. All of it eroding year by year, battle by battle, atrocity by atrocity. The Jedi Order had become something their founders wouldn't recognize. They were soldiers now, not peacekeepers. They ruled planets as Jedi Lords, passing their authority to their children. They made decisions about life and death on a daily basis. The old teachings about compassion and restraint felt like luxuries from a different age. Everyone was tired. The Republic was tired of losing ground. The Jedi were tired of fighting. The ordinary people caught between armies were tired of running and dying, but nobody knew how to stop. The stage was set for the final chapters of the war. The pieces were moving into position for an even darker period. The Republic Dark Age was coming, a time when central authority would collapse almost completely and the galaxy would fracture into countless feuding territories. What nobody knew was that all of this, every bit of the suffering and chaos, was building toward something. The war that had raged for 8 centuries was about to enter its final, most devastating phase. And from the ashes of that phase would come a new kind of Sith, one that would hide in the shadows for 1,000 years before finally destroying everything the Jedi had tried to protect. The Republic stopped functioning as a government somewhere around 1100 years before the Battle of Yavin. Not officially, but in every way that mattered. This period became known as the Republic Dark Age, and the name fit perfectly. Central governance collapsed. The Senate on Coruscant still met and passed laws, but those laws barely reached beyond the core worlds. Large portions of the galaxy operated completely outside Republic control. Some systems didn't even know there was supposed to be a government anymore. The Sith controlled huge territories, but they were just as fragmented as the Republic was weak. The galaxy had shattered into countless pieces, each ruled by whoever had the most power in that particular region. Order existed only in small pockets, and even that was temporary. The Jedi adapted to this new reality in ways their predecessors would have found horrifying. With no Republic government to serve, many Jedi Knights decided they had to become the government themselves. They crowned themselves Jedi Lords and took direct control of planets or entire sectors. These weren't peacekeepers anymore. They were feudal rulers. Jedi Lords built castles and established courts. They collected taxes, commanded armies, and passed judgment on their subjects. Some even started hereditary lines, passing their authority to their children when they passed away. The whole thing looked more like ancient kingdoms than anything the Republic was supposed to represent. But what choice did they have? Someone needed to maintain order. Someone needed to protect populations from Sith raiders and common criminals. The Jedi stepped into that void because nobody else could. They became Warlords of Light, fighting to preserve what they called islands of civilization in an ocean of darkness. On Coruscant, the Jedi High Council wielded more political power than ever before. Jedi still held the office of Supreme Chancellor. They made decisions that affected the entire Republic, or at least what was left of it. The separation between Jedi Order and government had disappeared completely. Meanwhile, the Sith were everywhere and nowhere. They'd never been more numerous, but they'd also never been more divided. Without a single Dark Lord to unite them, the Sith Warlords carved up the galaxy into rival fiefdoms and mini-empires. Each one claimed to be the rightful heir to the Sith legacy. Each one fought everyone else as much as they fought the Republic. Take Lord Odeon and Lady Daemon, for example. They were siblings who ruled neighboring territories in the Outer Rim. You'd think family ties might lead to cooperation. Instead, they waged constant war against each other, fighting over systems and resources with the same intensity they brought to battles with Jedi. The Sith couldn't help themselves. Even when victory was within reach, they turned on each other. This internal fighting actually helped the Republic survive. The Sith were so busy squabbling amongst themselves that they failed to deliver the coordinated knockout blow that would have finished off the core worlds. Every time a warlord got close to organizing a major offensive against Coruscant, 3 other warlords would attack him from behind. The chaos worked in the Republic's favor, at least in terms of basic survival. But for ordinary people living under Sith rule, the Dark Age was a nightmare. These warlords oppressed entire star systems with no opposition. They taxed populations into poverty, enslaved whoever they wanted, and snuffed out anyone who resisted. There was no Republic to appeal to for help. No Jedi would come to save you unless you happened to live in one of their protected sectors. Most people just suffered and hoped they'd survive long enough to see things get better. The galaxy had descended into complete fragmentation. Some regions were under Jedi Lords trying to maintain civilization. Other regions belonged to Sith warlords ruling through fear. Still others had no government at all, just anarchy and survival of the strongest. The darkness was everywhere. The Sith civil war raged within this broader conflict. With the Republic so weak, the warlords started seeing each other as the main obstacle to total power. Why waste resources fighting the dying Republic when you could conquer your Sith neighbor's territory instead? In 1066 years before Yavin, this internal fighting reached a peak with something called the Charge Matrika. It was a massive Sith-on-Sith battle in the Grumani sector. one of the largest engagements of the entire Dark Age. Thousands of Sith warriors clashed while the Republic wasn't even involved. They were battling each other over who got to rule once the Republic finally collapsed. That was the problem. The Sith knew victory was within their grasp. They could feel it. The Force itself seemed to favor them. The Republic was crumbling. The Jedi were scattered. Everything was falling into place for total Sith dominance. But they couldn't agree on who would rule once they won. Greed created a stalemate. Every warlord wanted to be the one on top when the dust settled. Nobody wanted to help another Sith gain too much power. So they fought each other and prolonged the war unnecessarily, wasting their advantage while the Republic barely clung to life. This went on for decades. The Sith civil wars continued alongside the larger conflict. Two wars happening at once in the same space. It was chaos on top of chaos, violence layered over violence. The galaxy had been at war for almost 9 centuries at this point, and the end still wasn't in sight. Then, around 1,000 years before Yavin, something changed. A leader emerged who managed to do what no one had done in generations. He united the Sith factions. He convinced the rival warlords to stop fighting each other and focus on their real enemy. He brought order to chaos and purpose to the scattered Sith armies. His name was Lord Kaan, and his rise would bring the war to its final devastating chapter. A Jedi Knight named Kaan looked at the galaxy burning around him and decided the Jedi were part of the problem. Around 1,010 years before the Battle of Yavin, Kaan was getting increasingly frustrated with the Jedi Council. They were too cautious, too slow to act, too willing to let the galaxy tear itself apart while they debated the right approach. In his mind, the Jedi shared the blame for 9 centuries of chaos. Their weakness had allowed the Sith to thrive. Their hesitation had let millions suffer. So Kaan left. He walked away from the Jedi Order and embraced the dark side. But Kaan didn't just become another Sith warlord fighting over scraps. He had a vision. He gathered rogue Jedi who felt the same frustration he did, convinced them the dark side was the answer, and combined them with existing Sith survivors. Together, they formed something new. He called it the Brotherhood of Darkness. Kaan declared himself a Dark Lord of the Sith and took the title of Dark One among his followers. Then he looked at the fractured mess the Sith had become and saw the real problem. The endless infighting was hurting them. Warlords spent more time stabbing each other in the back than fighting the Republic. The Sith Civil War had gone on for decades with no winner in sight. Kaan realized something the other warlords hadn't figured out. Unity was the only path to victory. If the Sith could actually work together, they'd be unstoppable. The Republic was barely hanging on. The Jedi were exhausted. One coordinated push from a unified Sith empire would end the war. So he set about making that happen. Kaan traveled across Sith-controlled space, meeting with warlords and making his case. "Join me," he told them. "Stop fighting each other and focus on our real enemy. Together we can finally destroy the Jedi and rule the galaxy." Some warlords refused. They'd spent too long building their own little kingdoms to hand power over to someone else. Kaan eliminated them, not through assassination or treachery, but through direct confrontation. He proved he was stronger, and he took their territories for the Brotherhood. Other warlords saw which way things were going and made the smart choice. The two most powerful Sith of the time, Lord Kopech and Lord Cordis, submitted to Kaan early in his campaign. They brought their armies with them, giving the Brotherhood a huge boost in military strength. Their defection sent a message to every other warlord. The era of petty kingdoms was over. The Brotherhood was the future. More Sith followed. Kasim, a Twi'lek weapons master. Lator, Kaok's Cruel. One by one, the surviving Sith warlords bent the knee and joined Kaan's cause. Some joined out of belief in his vision. Others joined because they feared being destroyed if they refused. Either way, the result was the same. The Brotherhood grew stronger. By 1006 years before Yavin, Kaan had done the impossible. He'd rebuilt a single Sith empire from the fragments of decades of civil war. The age of division was over. The Sith were united again for the first time in living memory. But Kaan's Brotherhood was different from every Sith regime that came before it. He understood why previous Dark Lords had failed. The old way of doing things, with one master dominating everyone else through fear, always led to betrayal and collapse. Someone would always try to overthrow the leader. The jealousy and treachery were built into the system. Kaan decided to try something radical. He declared that all Sith in the Brotherhood were equals, no master, no apprentice, no hierarchy of power. Just Dark Lords working together toward a common goal, united in purpose, devoid of the backstabbing that had destroyed the Sith for generations. He went further. Kaan banned the title Darth. That word, he said, was the source of all their problems. Every Sith who called themselves Darth started thinking they deserved to rule alone. The title bred arrogance and betrayal. So Kaan outlawed it completely. Instead, every Sith Lord in the Brotherhood could call themselves Dark Lord of the Sith. As long as they pledged loyalty to the collective cause, they kept that honorific. Everyone was equal. Everyone was a Dark Lord. Nobody was above anyone else. It was genius, really. Kaan massaged the egos of dozens of warlords who joined him. They didn't feel like they were submitting to a new master. They felt like they were joining a partnership of equals. The approach prevented the internal power struggles that had plagued every previous Sith alliance. The Brotherhood of Darkness became a vast war council. Decisions got made through consensus or through Kaan's clever manipulation of the group. He was still the leader, still the one with the most influence. But he made everyone feel like they had a voice, like they mattered. It kept them loyal in ways fear never could. This unified front changed everything. The Sith could finally maximize their numbers and resources. They could coordinate attacks across multiple sectors at once. They could plan long-term strategies instead of just reacting to whatever the Republic did. For the first time in the war, the Sith had their act together. The Jedi didn't see it coming at first. They actually thanked Kaan for taking out some of the worst Sith warlords during his consolidation campaign. They thought he was doing them a favor by eliminating their enemies. They completely missed what was really happening. But one Jedi Master understood. Lord Hoth, a renowned Jedi Lord who'd been fighting the Sith for years, immediately recognized the threat. A united Sith empire under a charismatic leader was far more dangerous than a dozen squabbling warlords. Hoth saw that Kaan's Brotherhood could actually win the war if left unchecked. Hoth brought his concerns to the Jedi High Council. They needed to respond to this new threat with everything they had. Half measures wouldn't work anymore. The Jedi had to unite just like the Sith had. So Hoth and the Council raised the Army of Light. They called on every Jedi Lord, every Knight, every Loyalist who could still fight. For the first time in the entire war, all remaining Jedi forces pooled their strength into a single army under Hoth's command. No more scattered defense. No more individual Jedi Lords protecting only their own territories. Everything would be coordinated. Everything would be unified. The stage was set for the final showdown. Two massive armies, each representing everything their side stood for. The Brotherhood of Darkness against the Army of Light. The Sith united under Kaan versus the Jedi united under Hoth. From 1006 years before Yavin onward, they engaged in all-out warfare. This wasn't raids or skirmishes or border conflicts. This was total war. A final decade-long campaign that would decide whether the Sith or the Jedi controlled the galaxy's future. Neither side held anything back. The casualties would be enormous. The destruction would be catastrophic. But after 9 centuries of endless conflict, the new Sith Wars were finally approaching their end. One way or another, this would be the last chapter. The final phase of the new Sith Wars was a holy war in everything but name. Two massive armies representing light and darkness clashed across the galaxy in what became known as the Light and Darkness War. This was the endgame. From 1005 to 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Lord Hoth's Army of Light and Lord Kaan's Brotherhood of Darkness threw everything they had at each other. No more skirmishes, no more limited engagements. This was total warfare on a scale the galaxy had rarely seen. The Brotherhood had grown to tens of thousands strong. Kaan's unified Sith Empire wasn't just powerful, it was coordinated in ways the Sith had never managed before. They moved to conquer the remaining Republic strongholds, pushing deeper into territory that had been loyal to Coruscant for millennia. The Army of Light mobilized every last resource to stop them. Every Jedi who could fight joined Hoth's forces. Every Republic loyalist who could hold a blaster got conscripted. Ships that had been mothballed for decades got pressed back into service. This was survival mode. The Republic was betting everything on one final campaign. The fighting was ferocious, both sides incurring tremendous losses in battle after battle. Nobody held back anymore. Victory at any cost became the only mindset that mattered. Entire fleets got destroyed. Thousands fell in single engagements. The casualties mounted so high that keeping accurate counts became impossible. Major battles raged across the galaxy. The Sith gained ground in one sector while the Jedi pushed back in another. Worlds changed hands multiple times. The front lines shifted constantly as both armies maneuvered for advantage. At first, the Sith were winning. Kaan proved to be a brilliant strategist. He used battle meditation, a rare force technique that amplified his troops' effectiveness in combat. When Kaan focused his will on a battle, his soldiers fought harder, aimed better, coordinated more smoothly. It was like having a strategic supercomputer running on the Force. The Brotherhood pushed the Jedi and Republic forces back on multiple fronts. Kaan launched a bold offensive that caught everyone off guard. His armies seized Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, and turned it into a forward operating base. From there, they invaded the galactic core itself. Nobody expected that. The core worlds were supposed to be safe, protected by centuries of fortifications and the concentrated power of the Republic military. Kaan smashed through those defenses like they were nothing. The Sith won major battles on Trandosha and Fasira. They broke through defensive lines that had held for generations. World after world fell to the Brotherhood's advance. The momentum was entirely on their side. Then Kaan's forces did something that terrified the Republic leadership. They captured Chandrila, Korulag, and Brental IV. These were core worlds, some of the most important planets in the entire Republic. Their fall opened a direct corridor toward Coruscant itself. For a brief period, it looked like the Sith were going to win. They were going to take Coruscant, overthrow the Republic, and rule the galaxy. It would be the first time the Sith controlled the galactic capital since the ancient wars against Exar Kun thousands of years earlier. Panic spread through the Senate. Evacuation plans got drawn up. Some officials started quietly reaching out to Sith intermediaries to negotiate surrender terms. The Republic was on the edge of total collapse. That's when Lord Hoth made his move. He gathered every Jedi and Loyalist troop he could find and mustered them on a planet called Ruusan. The world sat in a strategic position near Sith-held territory, perfect for staging a counteroffensive. Hoth's plan was simple but risky. Draw the Brotherhood to Ruusan, force them into a decisive battle, defeat them there, and end the war in one stroke. It was all or nothing. If the gambit failed, the Republic would fall. If it succeeded, the Sith would be broken. The result was 7 separate battles fought on Ruusan's surface and in its skies. 7 times the armies clashed. 7 times the casualties mounted higher. Ruusan became the focal point of the entire war, the place where everything would be decided. The first battle of Ruusan went badly for the Jedi. Kaan struck preemptively with his fleet, catching the small Jedi garrison by surprise. His forces annihilated the defenders and claimed the planet for the Sith. The Brotherhood had the high ground, literally and figuratively. The second battle saw Republic reinforcements try to retake Ruusan. They got repulsed. The Sith still had momentum, still had the advantage. It looked like Hoth's gambit was failing. Then Hoth himself arrived with the main army of light. Thousands of Jedi Knights, tens of thousands of Republic soldiers, ships filling the sky. The full weight of everything the Republic had left. The war shifted into a grinding stalemate. Through the 3rd, 4th, and 5th battles of Ruusan, the Jedi and Sith traded blows across the planet's forests and plains. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage. They just kept fighting, kept dying, kept pushing forward and getting pushed back. The casualties were horrific. Thousands fell in each engagement. Ruusan's once beautiful forests got burned to ash. The rivers ran red. By the later battles, both armies were falling apart. The Sith numbers were dwindling. Many Dark Lords had fallen in the fighting. Others were wounded or exhausted to the point of uselessness. The initial unity Kaan had built started to fray as hunger and fatigue set in. The Jedi were stretched impossibly thin. They were trying to fight the Brotherhood while also protecting local populations caught in the crossfire. Hoth's forces were outnumbered and exhausted, surviving on determination alone. Valentine Farfalla, another Jedi Lord, brought reinforcements to help. His troops arrived just in time to prevent total collapse. But even with those fresh soldiers, the Army of Light was barely hanging on. Lord Kaan grew increasingly unhinged as victory kept slipping through his fingers. He'd been so close to winning. His forces had reached the core worlds. They'd opened the path to Coruscant, and now they were stuck on this backwater planet, bleeding soldiers in an endless battle they couldn't seem to finish. That's when Darth Bane entered the picture. He'd been away from the Brotherhood, off studying ancient Sith knowledge and questioning Kaan's methods. Now he returned to Ruusan with dark advice for the increasingly desperate Kaan. During one clash, Bane orchestrated a Sith ritual that created something terrible. A wave of destruction swept across Ruusan's landscape. Dark side energy in its purest, most concentrated form. The storm immolated thousands of Jedi Knights in an instant, turning them to ash where they stood. The display was horrifying. Even Sith who witnessed it felt shaken by the raw, destructive power. Many perished on both sides, caught in the blast radius of concentrated dark side energy. Terror spread through the surviving Jedi ranks. What kind of weapon could end thousands in a heartbeat? But Lord Hoth refused to surrender. He'd committed to this battle. He'd staked everything on defeating the Sith at Ruusan. Retreat was not an option. The Jedi dug in and kept fighting. Farfalla's last wave of reinforcements arrived after the devastating ritual. They helped the survivors regroup and reinforce defensive positions. The Army of Light, battered and broken as it was, held the line. By now, Ruusan looked like a vision of the apocalypse. The lush forests that once covered the planet had been burned to charred wastelands. Craters pocked the landscape from orbital bombardments. The air smelled of smoke and death. Both armies were shells of what they'd been when the fighting started. The Brotherhood of Darkness was facing either defeat or total attrition. They were running out of soldiers, running out of supplies, running out of time. Kaan knew he needed something dramatic to break the stalemate. That's when Darth Bane suggested the ultimate weapon, an ancient Sith technique called the Thought Bomb, a ritual so powerful, so devastating, that it would wipe out every Force-sensitive being in range, Jedi and Sith alike. Kaan, desperate and half-mad from the endless fighting, listened. Bane was manipulating him, pushing him toward a choice that would destroy the Brotherhood. But Kaan couldn't see that. He just saw a way to finally win. The stage was set for the war's cataclysmic finale. After 1,000 years of fighting, after countless millions dead, the new Sith Wars were about to end in fire. The Seventh Battle of Ruusan was the end of everything. Both armies were broken. The Jedi barely had enough strength to stand. The Sith were running on fumes and desperation. Lord Kaan looked at his dwindling forces and made a choice that would doom them all. He decided to use the Thought Bomb. This wasn't some standard weapon. The Thought Bomb was an ancient Sith ritual, something so dangerous that most Dark Lords refused to even consider it. A last resort that came with a terrible price. But Kaan was out of options. He'd been fighting on Ruusan for what felt like forever. His grand vision of a unified Sith Empire was crumbling around him. The Jedi wouldn't break. They just kept fighting no matter how many of them fell. So Kaan gathered what remained of the Brotherhood of Darkness. Roughly 20,000 Sith Lords and Acolytes descended into a cave system deep beneath Ruusan's surface. They were going to perform the ritual together, combining their power into one devastating blast that would wipe out the Jedi once and for all. Outside the caves, Lord Hoth sensed something was wrong. His army of light was preparing to press the attack and finish off the Sith. But Hoth felt a disturbance in the Force. Dark energy was building beneath the ground, concentrating into something massive and terrible. The Jedi knew it was a trap. Hoth's officers urged him to pull back, to evacuate and regroup, but Hoth refused. He'd committed everything to this battle. If he retreated now, the Sith would escape and the war would drag on. This had to end on Ruusan. Hoth paused at the cave entrance. He could feel the thought bomb's dark energy coalescing below. The sensation was like standing next to a sun about to go supernova. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he made a choice that defined his legacy. Hoth ordered most of his remaining troops to fall back to a safe distance. Then he turned to the Jedi around him and asked for volunteers. Anyone willing to give their life to stop what was coming. 100 Jedi Knights stepped forward. They knew what they were walking into. They understood they probably wouldn't come back. But they followed Hoth into the caves anyway, determined to contain the destruction or not come back. Deep in the darkness below, Lord Kaan stood surrounded by his most loyal Sith lords. About 100 of them formed a circle, the inner core of the Brotherhood. They began the ritual, channeling their collective power into the ancient technique. The thought bomb was essentially a concentrated sphere of dark side energy. When detonated, it would obliterate every living thing connected to the Force within its radius. Jedi, Sith, anyone with even a hint of Force sensitivity. Their bodies would be destroyed and their souls trapped in the blast's aftermath. It was suicide. Kaan and everyone performing the ritual would fall alongside their enemies. But in his desperation and madness, Kaan had convinced himself this was victory. If he couldn't rule the galaxy, at least he could take the Jedi down with him. The ritual reached its crescendo. Power built and built until the cave itself seemed to vibrate with contained energy. Then Kaan detonated the bomb. A blinding flash tore through the caves. A wave of pure destruction exploded outward in all directions. The thought bomb annihilated. Every Force-sensitive being within range was instantly turned to ash. Bodies disintegrated. Even solid rock crumbled and vaporized in the blast. Lord Kaan perished in that moment. The entire Brotherhood of Darkness, 20,000 Sith gathered in those caves, ceased to exist in a single instant. Their physical forms were destroyed completely, reduced to less than dust. Lord Hoth and his 100 Jedi volunteers fell too. They'd made it into the caves but couldn't stop the ritual in time. The thought bomb's explosion caught them at close range. Like the Sith, their bodies were vaporized, their existence wiped from the physical world. But death wasn't the end for them. The thought bomb didn't just destroy bodies, it trapped souls. The spirits of everyone who passed away in the blast got sucked into a swirling vortex of dark side energy at the bomb's epicenter. Jedi and Sith alike, their essences caught in an eternal prison of Force energy. The devastation spread beyond just those in the caves. Jedi and Sith positioned farther away, outside the immediate radius, felt a psychic shockwave when the bomb detonated. The Force itself screamed. Many who survived the blast physically were driven mad by the psychic trauma. Others collapsed, their minds temporarily shattered by the overwhelming sensation of thousands dying at once. When the dust settled, silence fell over Ruusan. The caves had collapsed. The battlefield above had gone quiet. Both armies had been decimated in a single horrific moment. The 7th Battle of Ruusan was over. The war was over. The Brotherhood of Darkness no longer existed. 20,000 Sith dead in the caves. Any scattered Sith marauders who might have survived elsewhere in the galaxy were now leaderless. Without Kaan to hold them together, they'd either be hunted down by Jedi or struck down by rivals. The unified Sith Empire had been wiped out completely. The Jedi Army of Light was also shattered. They'd lost Lord Hoth, their greatest commander. They'd lost hundreds of knights, including many of the Order's finest warriors. The leadership was gone. The army was broken. Only a handful of Jedi survived to witness the aftermath. Valentine Farfalla and a few others who'd stayed farther from the caves when the bomb detonated. They emerged from their positions to find a wasteland. The forests were gone. The ground was scarred. And in the place where the caves had been, there was now a crater surrounded by an eerie stillness. Republic forces regrouped in the ruins. As they took stock of what happened, the realization slowly sank in. The Sith were gone, actually gone. The threat that had plagued the galaxy for 1,000 years had been eliminated. News spread across the galaxy. The new Sith Wars were over. After a millennium of fighting, after countless billions dead, after civilizations rising and falling in the shadow of endless conflict, peace had finally come. The galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. It was over. The nightmare was done. The Republic had survived barely, and the Sith were extinct. The cost had been tremendous. The Republic was a shell of its former self. Entire regions lay in ruins. Technology had regressed. Knowledge had been lost. Generations had known nothing but war and would need to relearn how to live in peace. But they'd won. That's what mattered. The Sith were gone. In later years, the scarred landscape of Ruusan became a memorial. The cavern where the thought bomb detonated became known as the Valley of the Jedi. It was a haunted place where the Force felt twisted and heavy. People claimed they could hear voices there, the spirits of the fallen trapped in the vortex of dark energy. Monuments were erected to honor the Jedi sacrifice. Lord Hoth became a legend, the hero who gave everything to save the galaxy. His 100 volunteers were remembered as martyrs who chose death over allowing the Sith to escape. The Jedi Order began rebuilding. They'd taken massive losses, but survivors remained to carry on the traditions. A new generation would be trained. The Order would recover and grow strong again. What the Jedi didn't know was that 2 people walked away from Ruusan alive. 2 Sith who survived because they were never in those caves when the thought bomb detonated. Darth Bane and his new apprentice, Darth Zana. Bane had orchestrated everything. He'd manipulated Kaan into using the thought bomb, knowing it would destroy the Brotherhood. He'd stayed away from the blast radius, ensuring his survival. And now, with every other Sith dead, he was the last Dark Lord standing. But Bane kept to the shadows. He made sure the Jedi truly believed the Sith were extinct. No dramatic reveals, no threats or proclamations, just silence. The galaxy thought the Sith were gone forever, and Bane wanted to keep it that way. The new Sith Wars were over. But in that ending, in that moment of apparent victory, the seeds of something darker had been planted. The Sith weren't extinct. They were just hidden, waiting, planning for a revenge that would take 1,000 years to unfold. The galaxy had to figure out how to live in peace after 1,000 years of war. Nobody alive knew how that worked anymore. Supreme Chancellor Tarsus Valorum and the Jedi High Council sat down in the aftermath of Ruusan and made some hard decisions. They implemented what became known as the Ruusan Reformations, sweeping changes that reshaped how the Republic worked and what role the Jedi would play going forward. The first major change was disbanding the Republic's standing armies. After a millennium of constant warfare, this seems like an insane decision, but the thinking made sense at the time. War had nearly destroyed civilization. The military had consumed resources and lives for generations. People were exhausted. They wanted peace, and they wanted guarantees that another conflict like this could never happen again. So the Republic demilitarized. They disbanded the massive fleets and armies that had fought the Sith. From now on, individual sectors would be responsible for their own defense forces. The central government would no longer maintain a military. This is why by the time of the Phantom Menace, there is no Republic army. That decision was made 1,000 years earlier on Ruusan. The office of Supreme Chancellor got weakened too. Term limits were put in place. New checks and balances were written into law. The goal was preventing any future dictator from rising to power and dragging the galaxy into another war. Nobody wanted another situation where one person could make decisions that affected trillions of lives. The Jedi Order made their own changes. They felt complicit in the war's devastation. For centuries, Jedi had ruled as lords, commanded armies, and made political decisions. They'd become warriors and governors instead of peacekeepers. Many in the Order believed they'd lost their way, so the Jedi voluntarily stepped back from political power. They gave up their feudal titles. They surrendered their command positions. They returned to serving as peacekeepers under the Senate's oversight, advisors rather than rulers. Never again would a Jedi serve as Supreme Chancellor. Never again would Jedi generals command Republic armies, at least not for another 1,000 years, when the Clone Wars would force them right back into those roles. But in the moment, the reforms felt necessary and right. These changes ushered in what historians call the Republic Golden Age, a millennium of relative peace and stability. Sure, there were still pirates and conflicts and problems, but nothing on the scale of the new Sith Wars. The galaxy got to breathe. Civilization recovered. Technology advanced. Knowledge that had been lost got rediscovered. Trade flourished. Populations grew. It was everything people had dreamed about during those dark centuries of war. Peace wasn't just possible. It was the new normal. But the Ruusan reformations also planted seeds for future problems. The Republic's disarmament left them vulnerable. Their complacency made them blind to threats. When Darth Sidious eventually made his move 1,000 years later, he exploited every weakness these reforms had created. The galaxy's long peace had made them soft and unprepared. But all of that was in the future. In the immediate aftermath of Ruusan, nobody was thinking about future Sith threats. The Sith were extinct. Everyone knew that. The thought bomb had wiped them out completely, except it hadn't. 2 Sith walked away from Ruusan alive. Darth Bane took his new apprentice, Darth Zana, and disappeared into the shadows. They went into hiding, carefully concealing any trace of their presence. As far as the galaxy knew, the Sith were gone forever. Bane wanted to keep it that way. He spent time thinking about why the Sith kept failing. Every Sith empire in history had collapsed from internal fighting. Darth Ruusan's movement shattered after he fell. The Brotherhood of Darkness destroyed itself on Ruusan. The pattern was clear. Numbers made the Sith weak, not strong. Too many Dark Lords meant too much ambition, too much betrayal, too much chaos. Bane formalized a new doctrine, the rule of two, one master and one apprentice. No more, no less. Every previous Sith leader had tried to build armies and empires. Bane was doing the opposite. He was limiting the Sith to just two people at any given time. It seemed like weakness, but it was actually brilliant. With only two Sith, there would be no massive wars to attract Jedi attention, no internal fighting over who should lead, no betrayals that collapsed entire organizations, just a master training an apprentice, passing on knowledge and growing stronger with each generation. The rule of two had another purpose too. It ensured the Sith grew more powerful over time. The apprentice would eventually challenge the master. If the apprentice won, they proved they were stronger and became the new master. If they lost, they weren't worthy and the master would find a better student. Either way, each generation pushed the Sith to greater heights. Bane and Zana moved around the galaxy in secret. They gathered ancient knowledge, collecting holocrons and texts from past Sith Lords. They studied techniques that had been lost or forgotten. They learned from the mistakes of those who came before them. Years passed. Bane trained Zana in everything he knew. He pushed her hard, testing her constantly, forcing her to grow stronger. Eventually, he decided she was ready for the final test. Zana challenged Bane to a duel, master versus apprentice. The fight was fierce, but Zana won. She struck down Darth Bane around 980 years before the Battle of Yavin and became the new Dark Lady of the Sith. This was exactly how the rule of two was supposed to work. The master falls, the apprentice ascends, and the Sith line continues stronger than before. Zana took her own apprentice and the pattern repeated. That Sith took an apprentice, then another, then another. For 1,000 years, the Sith passed their knowledge down through an unbroken chain of masters and apprentices, always two, never more. The Jedi had no idea. They truly believed the Sith were extinct. Every history book said so. Every master taught their students that the Sith threat ended on Ruusan. The Order let their guard down. Why watch for an enemy that no longer exists? The Sith worked from the shadows. They infiltrated governments. They manipulated politicians. They planted seeds of corruption that would take centuries to bear fruit. They were patient in ways the old Sith never managed. No rushing into open war, no dramatic reveals, just quiet, careful work to undermine everything the Republic stood for. This millennial game of patience allowed the Sith to infiltrate the Republic at its highest levels. They got close to power, close to the people who made decisions, close enough to strike when the time was right. The culmination of Bane's line was Darth Sidious, also known as Sheev Palpatine. He was the Sith Lord who finally achieved what 1,000 years of planning had built toward. In 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, Sidious orchestrated the fall of the Republic and the destruction of the Jedi Order. He used the Clone Wars to militarize the Republic again, undoing those Ruusan reformations. He turned the Jedi into generals, forcing them back into roles they'd sworn to abandon. He played both sides of the conflict, manipulating events to give himself emergency powers. Then, when everything was perfectly positioned, he executed Order 66 and wiped out the Jedi in a single day. The Sith grand plan succeeded. After 1,000 years of hiding and planning and waiting, they got their revenge. The Republic became the Empire. The Jedi were gone. The Sith ruled the galaxy. All of it traced back to Darth Bane's decision on Ruusan. His rule of two, his patience, his understanding that sometimes the best way to win is to hide and wait for your enemy to forget you exist. The new Sith Wars shaped everything that came after. The Republic's demilitarization made them vulnerable to Sidious's manipulation. The Jedi's complacency blinded them to the threat growing in the shadows. The 1,000 years of peace made everyone forget what war looked like until it was too late to stop it. The horrors and lessons of that millennium of conflict paved the way for the events of the prequel trilogy. Darth Bane's legacy proved that the new Sith War's end was not the end of the Sith. It was just the beginning of a darker, more patient kind of evil. One that would wait 1,000 years to strike and change the galaxy forever.